Chapter 11. A Little Bit of History. The next Monday, there was no important new work to do for a few days, so I asked my boss for some time off work. I told him Andrea wasn't feeling well and needed some help at home with the baby in the afternoons. He kindly said I could go to the office only in the mornings, for a week or two, until the next big piece of work arrived from Britain. I decided not to tell Andrea what I was going to do. She had been kind enough to come with me to the meeting that Sunday, when she really didn't want to, and I didn't want to make her angry or worried again. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, on Monday the 19th of January, I was sitting in the reading room of the Budapest City Library, with a lot of big books in front of me. They were not really books, but newspapers that had been made into books. I wanted to find out everything that had happened in Budapest's 13th district on every 18th of January. I decided to read one of Hungary's best-known newspapers, because it always had lots of news about what was happening in Budapest. I had asked the librarian for this newspaper for every month of January, starting from 10 years before. I went through the Budapest pages for each year very carefully. I studied the days between the 12th and the 25th of January, as this was the week before and the week after the date of meeting my doppelganger. Of course, I was always very careful when I got to each 18th of January. It took me longer than I'd expected, and I was only just able to finish the first 10 Januaries before the library closed at 5 o'clock. My Hungarian was good, but it still took me a long time to read the old newspapers. I went to the reading room each afternoon. I discovered all sorts of things I never knew about Budapest. Much of what I read about from before 1990 was, of course, about the Communist Party. There was more and more information about groups of politicians and workers who visited from other Eastern European countries, the deeper into the past I went. I sometimes found information about the 13th district, but nothing interesting, and I had found nothing about Felka Utca. I was beginning to think I would never find anything, or that my reading would have to go back into the 19th century. On Saturday, I told Andrea that I had a meeting at work, but instead I went to the library at 8:30 in the morning, with a complete day ahead of me. By early afternoon, I had got back to the 1940s. It was almost closing time when I reached the 19th of January 1945. By now I was tired. But then I saw something at the bottom of the Budapest page of the newspaper. It jumped out at me. It said in Hungarian, "Young mother and child killed as fighting ends in Pest." The story said that the day before, the 18th of January, was the end of the fighting between the German soldiers inside Pest and the Russians who were all around them. It then said that the happy day for Pest was also sad for people in the 13th district. A Russian bomb had hit a Gergely Utca building. It didn't explode, but it destroyed the cellar, killing a young mother and her daughter. The dead woman was later named as Mrs. Sobo. I made a copy of this story and went home. I decided to tell Andrea about what I'd found out. "And where have you been?" Andrea asked as I walked into the flat. "What do you mean?" I asked back. "I rang you at the office to tell you I was taking Cotty out this afternoon," she replied. "The receptionist said you weren't there, and she also said that there was no meeting." Andrea was very angry. I looked at the floor. "Well, John," she went on, "where was it this time? Felka Utsa? Gerge Utsa? Some other stupid street?" "Andrea," I started, "I've been reading the newspapers." I took out the copy of the newspaper story. "Look," I said. She read it quickly. "And what do you think this shows?" she asked. She looked angry. "Well, the date," I said, "and the street. They're the same. The 18th of January and Gerge Utsa." "So, what are you going to do now?" she replied. "Well, we must try to find somebody from this Mrs. Sobo's family, I think," I replied. "Perhaps they still live in the building." "Don't say we," she said. "I told you that last Sunday was my last time. And anyway, which building? Gerge Utsa or Felka Utsa?" "I don't know," I answered. "But just think about it. My doppelganger comes out of the building in Felka Utsa and runs round to Gerge Utsa on the 18th of January. Perhaps the people were hiding from the fighting in his house. He was visiting a friend. He heard about it and ran home to see what had happened. So he lived in Gerge Utsa." "You're very good at telling stories, John," said Andrea, and walked into the bedroom. "But Andrea," I said, following her, "I've got to find out. Don't you understand? If I don't, I'll never be free of this dream. I have to know the truth. It could be important for me in some way. There has to be a reason for this meeting." "Look, John," she said, "you do what you want, but just don't expect any help from me. Do you understand?" And with that, she picked up Cotty, who was already dressed to go out, put on her coat, and walked out of the flat.